everyone can agree on one thing: phantoms suck. And the 2017 mob vote losers were great concepts that could have been much better implemented than the phantom. However, if you look at the way the barnacle and the great hunger works, they could have ended as potentially worse than the phantom. My goal today is to turn those mobs, the Whitefire, the Barnacle, the Great Hunger and the Phantom, into good mobs that fit the Minecraft world. First, I'm going to talk about the Whitefire, which was my personal favorite out of the 4 mobs of the 2017 mob vote. This mob is basically a stronger version of the Blaze, wearing shields to protect himself and using shockwaves to harm players. A lot of people, including myself, really want a Fortress Revamp update, and the Whitefire would fit perfectly here, making fortresses on par with Bastion in terms of challenge. But instead of adding new rooms in fortresses with a limited amount of Whitefire in every world, I think it would work better if we were to add a similar spawning mechanic in fortresses as the trial chamber spawning mechanics of mobs like the Breeze. So what I would do is I would change blaze spawners in fortresses to be instead nether spawners. And so nether spawners would be set to generate blazes when they are approached by a player. However, if the player drank an ominous potion before approaching the nether spawner, it's going to spawn Whitefire instead. And Whitefire would basically act as midi bosses in fortresses. Upon death, they would loot a nether key that you could use to open nether vaults, which are the equivalent of the trial vaults in trial chambers. Those vaults would basically contain stuff that are linked to potion, like blaze rods, nether warts. And I would also add some unique loot to incentivize players to visit fortresses, such as a new enchantment for the mace, for example, like something that makes the mace shockwave stronger. Or I would also try to give a use to a blue nether wart, so you can brew a new type of potion, for example. Now let's talk about the Barnacle. The Barnacle is a sort of squid-like creature with a tongue that it can use to drag down players and drown them. This creature is supposed to be found in oceans, in sorts of deep waters. But currently in Minecraft there's not really something that corresponds to that. There is no abyss biomes, and the only really deep waters you can find are basically in underwater caves, where you can typically find glow squid. Now, I would really love it if Mojang could add an underwater dimension or an abyss biome in Minecraft, but I don't think it's their priority right now. I don't think we're going to see that happen anytime soon. The much more realistic thing would be to have the Barnacle spawn in underwater caves. And this mob would basically try to ambush you while you are swimming next to it, and he would try to latch onto you with his tongue to drag you down and basically make you drown. This creature would be slightly tougher than a regular mob, but not as strong as a boss. Now, I would add several mechanics to this creature. So not only could it latch its tongue onto you to drag you down, it could also damage you with its mouth once you're close enough to it. And if you hit it back with your sword, it can stop its tongue from latching on you, and it can also release a lot of ink to try to make you lose sight of it. Then it would go away, swim away, to try to regenerate as much as possible before coming back to hunt you down again. Once you kill it, if you manage to kill it, it could drop tentacles that you could eat, raw or cooked, and it could also loot his tongue, which you could use to craft a grabbing rod. And a grabbing rod is a tool that you could use to grab small mobs and attract them to you. When it was first shown before Minecraft 2017 mob vote, the Great Hunger was basically a small mob with a really big mouth that would hide in desert to try to ambush the player. And it would have a unique property to disenchant items that you would throw to it. During 1.14, the Village and Pillage update, Mojang added the Grindstone, which does exactly that. So now adding the Great Hunger with a disenchanting ability would be redundant. But I don't think this creature needs to have an ability like that to be interesting. I think that it is fine just as a standard hostile mob, just like zombies and skeletons. What would be interesting about it is its mechanic, how to fight it, and its loot. So currently its only ability would be to hide under the sand in desert, and it would try to ambush players from beneath the sand. One thing that is a little annoying is that currently in desert you can have spiders, creepers, skeletons, and husks. That's a lot of different hostile mobs. They all fill a very precise goal, and adding yet another hostile mob in the mix could clash with the purpose of other hostile mobs. What I would do is I would change the spawn rate of skeletons and creepers to 0. Creepers and skeletons can no longer spawn in desert, and I would make the Great Hunger spawn in their place. Why would I do that? Well, I think something great about video games is that when you wander into a new biome, it means new objects, new blocks it's in Minecraft, new loot, and new monsters to fight. But in Minecraft, currently, if you walk in a biome at night, it's always the same enemies. It only really changes, like if you go into a pale garden, you're going to meet a creaking, several creakings. If you go and wander into the deep dark, you're going to meet the warden, but those are exceptions. In any other biome at night, it's going to be zombies, creepers, skeletons, spiders. And I would love for that to change. So instead, you go into a plain biome, alright, zombies, skeletons, spider, creepers. But if you go into a snowy biome, you're going to meet strays instead. You're going desert, husks, but that's not enough because creepers, skeletons, regular skeletons, and spiders can still spawn there. So what I would do is start making more biomes where skeletons can spawn, or spiders, or zombies, or creepers, and you put another mob instead in their place. That would make the game much more interesting, and it would also give an incentive for players to stay awake at night instead of using a bed. Okay, I want to fight this mob, so I need to go to this biome and I need to wait for the night so I can fight it. Now, concerning the Great Hunger, I think it would be really cancerous if it was paired with skeletons or creepers. I basically want those mobs to be unable to spawn, and I put the Great Hunger in their place. So now you have to fight spiders, husks, and the Great Hunger in desert, and I think that's just enough. Now, in terms of health, I want to give the Great Hunger a tiny bit more health than a regular zombie. I would make it a bit slower. Basically, its whole strength is that if you don't see his eyes peeking out of the sand, he ambushes you and deals lots of damage. Upon death, the Great Hunger would loot leather and teeth. You could use these teeth to repair your armor, your tools, and your weapons in an anvil, and it would cost 0 level to do so. It would basically replace iron ingots and diamonds that you would usually waste to repair your armor. Instead, you can use those resources for something else, and it gives this mob pretty good loot, which means it also gives an incentive to go into a desert at night. Finally, I would also like to rework the way the Phantom works. Currently, this mob is a massive pain in the butt, and everyone hates the Phantom for several reasons. The first is that it forces you to sleep every once in a while. It is annoying to fight. The drop you get from the Phantom is pretty mid. They always interrupt you while you are building, and they're just annoying in general. To make this creature more bearable, first of all, I would make Phantoms unable to spawn in packs of 3. It's always 1 or 2 Phantoms at max, because when there are 3 of them, it's just too much of an annoyance. The second thing is that I would get rid of the whole sleeping thing. Basically, now they always spawn during the night. You cannot deactivate their spawning by sleeping unless you skip the night. But instead of spawning everywhere in the overworld, they would only spawn in 2 very specific biomes. First one would be very tall mountains, which means that if you want to fight phantoms, you need to look for a tall mountain. And in the meantime, you are free of fighting phantoms in every other biome. And the second biome I would make them spawn in is the Pale Garden biome, above the canopy. So that way, you can build your base in any other biome and always be safe from them. However, if you trespass in a Pale Garden at night, creakings will attack you below the trees and phantoms will attack you above them. So choose your poison or don't go in a Pale Garden biome. That's it for today. Don't hesitate to tell me what you think about my ideas in the comments, and I'll see you later.